Episode 5 The Wilderness. I met the right man at the wrong time, so I had to choose myself instead. Fall 2017. My landlord's baby mama sets me up on a blind date. I didn't want to go. I was exhausted, broke, literally barely surviving. But I went anyway. And that's when I met JB, the man who would eventually become my husband. But the right person at the wrong time is still the wrong person. So I left, and I spent the next 3 years learning how to be alone. My name is Shamiria Bailey, and this is No Sugar on the Rocks. Last episode, I told y'all about what it was like to leave my first husband for the first time and how short-lived it was for me to be on my own before I needed his help again, and what help looked like for him and how that continued to cripple me. So once I peeped the play that my husband had bought me a lemon, now I'm accepting the downfall once again. Because without a vehicle, now I don't have a job. And if I don't have a job, I can't pay my bills. And if I can't pay my bills, then here come homelessness once again, right? And so I'm in this situation and accepting it for what it is, accepting my fault for it, blaming myself, and just bracing myself for what was going to come. Me and my landlord's baby mother had became fairly close at this time. She lived directly across the street from the place that I was renting. And, she had children and our boys were close in age. We weren't in city limits. And so having a friend there, having kids there, we became quite familiar over time. She hits me up one day and she's like, hey, I got an odd question. But this dude that I'm dating is visiting from Augusta, Georgia, but he don't have a license and his cousin is bringing him. Would you like to kick it with the cousin for a little bit? It'll be fun. You gotta buy nothing, whatever. So I asked her to send me pictures of him, and lucky for him, my type, you gotta be threesome to see some. Okay? And so he was this chubby, dark-skinned guy, and I was like, sure, let's do it. Let's do it. And so he comes up for a weekend and I meet him and he's quiet and he's subtle. And I'm doing my best to just hold my reality together. I'm doing my best to be normal, right? Then we had been speaking before he officially came. And so he knew a little bit of the situation, but of course I dressed it up as good as I could. I met him over my friend's house. We all went out from there. And we had a great night. By the time the night ends, I invite him to my house. I let him know, I don't even think the power was on at that time. But nonetheless, baby, we finna go to bed if you want a bed to sleep in. Or maybe the power was on. I can't remember. But we hit it off. We had an amazing weekend, a great night. And yeah, we're getting to know each other after that weekend. And, for weeks after that weekend, he's letting me know that he's interested in me and he's interested to see where this could go with us. And I'm letting him know, like I would let everybody know, all of my nonsense and all of my loose ends and all of my mess and all the issues that I was having at that point. And I wasn't sharing that with him for him to fix it. I was really sharing it with him so he knew the magnitude of the situation that I was in, right? I had learned at that point in my life that I probably shouldn't agree to be anybody else's anything because I didn't really have much to go off of. Interestingly enough, he accepted me, flaws and all, and he invited me to just come to his house. Things had gotten so bad on my end, one unfortunate situation after the next, and he was just like, just come here. I stay at my mama's house, but it's a big house. We have a lot of room, it's a lot of space. She'd love to have you here. And I just really doubted that because I had a mama of my own and she did not love to have me there. And so that sounded foreign to me. It took him a while to convince me that that was the case. And he really wasn't successful until he sent me a Amazon cart full of Paw Patrol furniture and a toddler bed and a toy box for my son and all of these resources that his mom had purchased awaiting my arrival. He had her assure me that I was welcomed and that my son was welcomed and they would do anything that they could to help me. And per usual, I needed some help. I wasn't in no situation to turn down help. And it made more sense because we got along so well and we vibed so good and the attraction was there. I ain't have nothing else and nobody else. And so I went. I went to his mom's house with him, with my son, and I was welcomed there. Immediately, I was met with support and assistance and resources. Immediately, they showered us with love and admiration. And I couldn't get used to it, if I'm being honest. That was hard. Being in that situation, receiving such care, I felt out of place. My life was a lot different than his. I come from a trying mother that has spent every day of my life in the workforce, working for every dollar that she had, sometimes barely making ends meet, where more mouths to feed meant more of a burden, and directly into this home with this man who was an only child. He didn't have any children. His family was proud military. His dad was a retired military sergeant. They had all the structure, balance, stability, and family in the world. They were so sound and balanced and calm. Just so safe. And I didn't know what to do with that. I was dating a man that didn't have to work if he didn't want to and didn't have to leave home if he didn't want to. And not because he didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge or the education to do so, but because, you know, his family unit just believed in something different. They were just set up so very different. And so, where on a personal level, we got along so well, the deeper we went, I realized just how different we were. Instead of becoming comfortable and enjoying the assistance and allowing myself to be supported from people who actually had the means to support me, I freaked out. And I'm telling him, I have to get a job and we have to get our own place. And we cannot stay with your mom. And your mom can't help me with my son. She can't pay my phone bill. And I have to be an adult. And at that time, that's the only thing I knew. And adulthood for me up until that point was figure it all out the hard way, stress and struggle. Like there was no easy way out. There was nobody to fix it or to make it work for you. My mother had literally trained me in the complete opposite manner of let somebody else do it. And so I had to do it on my own. And if me and you are going to be together, you're going to have to do it on your own too. You know, it doesn't matter the kind of support and structure and family and love that you have. Okay. We have to get out here and be adults and stand on our own 2 feet and parents and, you know, and he agreed. In the beginning, we managed. And I wouldn't say things were good or bad, but just that we managed because that's what I was accustomed to up until that point was just managing. And as long as I was safe, I was okay just managing. He got a job too. And, you know, we both are working 9 to 5s and we're paying market rent and we're paying lights and water and, you know, and we're managing. And this life looks a lot like the life that my mother lived. And so this was normal, except we have help. You know, his family was so helpful to me as a first time mom, as a single mom. And, you know, being at work and having someone text me and say, you don't have to worry about picking up your son today. I'm going to get him from school. And then getting off and her saying, I fed him dinner and I got him a bath and he's in bed. Don't worry. Like that was so easy that it was uncomfortable. And while I am experiencing a first, you know, this man that I'm now given a family has gone from being comfortable with his feet kicked up, doing whatever he wanted to do, to living paycheck to paycheck and having to decide if he wants to eat takeout or, you know, put some gas in the car. And at the time, I didn't realize what that difference was for us because I didn't mind struggling so long as I was safe, as I was protected, so long as someone cared about me and my son. But from a person who's already always had that, being with me was less than he ever had. And being with him was more than I ever had. And he wasn't happy. And of course, he has his own struggles and his own life and going through things in his own world. and he wasn't happy. And at that time in my life, I felt like there was something that I should have been able to do or something that I could have done to make him happy. And the more I tried to make him happy from a happy, deficient place, because I didn't know happy for myself, right? I needed him to be happy for the both of us. But the more I tried to make him happy, the worse things got between us. And what was once my safe place and what was once my safe haven now was under this gray cloud that felt so heavy. And I felt responsible for making someone else happy. And I had to acknowledge that at that point, nobody else was responsible for making me happy. And I remembered that I couldn't breathe again. And that tightness in my nervous system came back. And depression took over. And I reminded myself that I wasn't worthy and I was in the way. And he became more and more unhappy because he got hurt at work and he couldn't work. And he went from barely having enough money to not having any money at all. And we couldn't make it work. That's where I learned that the right person at the wrong time is still absolutely the wrong person. I couldn't do anything for him. And honestly, he couldn't do anything for me that wasn't going to deplete him. And so I left again. And this time I left and I didn't leave for any person. I didn't have a backup. We broke up and I told him that I needed to focus on myself and I could no longer maintain and manage another person's emotions and I couldn't be anything else to anybody else. I couldn't keep any more promises. I couldn't bite my tongue any further. I really just had to go focus on myself. And so I went to go stay with one of my sisters. I started working at a nightclub and earning some really fast, quick money while being dressed up cute. I was still receiving that male attention, still finding companionship, but I wasn't doing it in a way that was depleting myself. I was regaining my confidence and, really building myself back up from the inside out. Me and my sister, we cried together, we dreamed together, we planned together, we vented. We really supported each other in a time in our lives where we both were single mothers, alone, with babies, hurt, trying to figure out a better, healthier way to just be. And JB decided that we would remain friends and that he would continue to show up for my son and I, and that we would keep space for one another. And that didn't work well in the beginning because we still had feelings for one another and he still, wanted me and I wanted him, but I didn't want a relationship. I didn't know how to make it successful. And in that waiting period, I applied for income-based housing in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And I only picked Jacksonville, North Carolina because that was the only other state that I had ever lived in. That was the state that my first husband had moved me to. And it was the only other state that had any other friends by default. And so Georgia didn't feel like home to me because everything that I was running from was in Georgia. And so North Carolina was my next best shot because it was the only other thing I was familiar with. So I was off again. And although the running looked the same, it felt very different this time because this time I wasn't running from anyone or to anyone but myself. I was literally running to myself. I got to Jacksonville, North Carolina in 2019. I lived in what they would call their hood. I lived in their projects. And their projects was a cakewalk compared to any projects I had ever been a part of. Their project had a playground for the babies, had grass and yard men. And that was an upgrade from the projects that I had experienced. So I was comfortable. It was almost as soon as the door closed and I was inside of that apartment by myself that I even ever met myself for the first time. The silence was so loud. And the fact that there was no one around me that knew me enough to control me, to silence me. There was nobody around to tell me who I was or who I needed to be. There was nobody around to challenge where I was going or where I wanted to be. It was like a clean slate in a brand new life on another timeline. And it didn't look like nothing to nobody else, but it was literally the start. of the very best of my life. I cried every day in my apartment by myself. I cried every day for 2 years straight. I journaled, I prayed, I released. I cried for the sexual violence that I had experienced as a child. I cried for the estrangement that I felt towards my parents, my family members. I cried because of a failed marriage. I cried because there was a man that thought it was okay to draw blood from me. I cried because I let a man beat me. I cried because I was diagnosed with cancer. I cried because I had a miscarriage. I cried because I had to go through chemotherapy. I cried. I cried because I was deceived. I cried because they told me I couldn't have kids again. I cried. I just cried. Every day I cried. The trials didn't stop. The lessons didn't stop. But it felt like I had discovered muscles that I didn't know I had. Like I was finding details about myself that I did not know were there. I was discovering a strength, a power that I did not know I possessed. And it was a different power than the power of my words. Before that moment, as many tears as I had cried before these set of tears, all of those tears were filled with grief, and all these new tears were filled with relief. With each of these tears, my body felt lighter. With each of these tears, my vision got clearer. With each of these tears, my skin got tougher. This crying felt different. I learned that healing was not linear. I learned that once you start uncovering one wound, it uncovers another and another and another. And all of these wounds leave an imprint on your soul and in your body. There's a process of unlearning what you've been through that has to take place before you can relearn, right? Before your body can heal, can process a new reality. And so healing didn't look fun. Victory wasn't fun and enlightening. It was years of crying. It was years of what felt like a genuine scary movie. North Carolina gave me a new outlook on myself, and it taught me how to cry and keep going, how to hurt and keep moving, how to process and manage my life and still carry my story with strength, how to set boundaries and say no. The people in North Carolina saw me in a way that I had never been seen before. It felt like spiritual warfare. It felt like a series of classes and courses to finally become my own woman, my own person. Me and JB remained friends. We did our best to fill the gaps with one another. We encouraged each other to live still. We had this saying, don't commit to me, commit to evolving, and I'll meet you there. I didn't know how we would end up back together, but the safety and love and family and forgiveness and patience that I felt with him, I knew that if he was not my husband, that he was setting the tone for who my husband was supposed to be. I am so grateful to this day that I was given that opportunity to be loved by him still, even when I was not ready. I met JB when I was still running. And honestly, I knew that if I stayed, I was going to ruin it. So I left, not because he hurt me, but because I needed to start running from things and start running towards myself. The next 3 years, the hardest of my life and the most necessary, because that's when I fully discovered my power. That's when I became Shamiria, fully, for the first time. The work isn't done. Healing isn't linear. But I'm not who I was, and that's victory. This is No Sugar on the Rocks. I'm Shamiria. And if you made it through all 5 episodes, thank you for witnessing my story. More episodes are coming. I promise this is just the beginning.